Ladies and gentlemen, angry Americans around the country and around the globe, welcome to the Classic Car Club in New York City for an extraordinary conversation, one I've been looking forward to from the beginning, really from maybe my childhood. Honestly.
That's good. That's good.
We have the great and powerful Harry Smith has joined us here in the Classic Car Club.
I don't know about the powerful. I'll take the great. I'll take the great. Great, if only because I've lasted as long as I have, right? I got miles.
You do?
I have miles. I got a lot of miles.
We have a car behind you that's a Ford that's got to be like a 67.
It's the Shelby, I think.
It's the Shelby.
Yeah.
And what has more miles on it, that car or you?
Me.
You, definitely.
Oh, yeah, no
that
question.
car looks like it's been well cared
however,
for.
oh, by the way, that car, much faster than I am.
But you're still around.
Oh, dude.
And Ford, I'm not so sure about. I mean, we covered this in a previous podcast, but now they're down to they will soon be down to only producing the Mustang. It will be the only car they produce, and now the Mustang's an SUV.
So
did you know that?
We're going to see Ford next month. We're going to go spend some time with their electric engineers, talk about their electric force, talk with Jim Hackett, who's the CEO. Yeah, we're going there. We're going there probably in January.
He's an interesting guy. He's not a car guy. He came from Steelcase, right?
Steelcase, but he's an old Michigan football player. And so all roads in my house lead back to Ann Arbor because my wife is a graduate of Michigan, and we know Jim Hackett through the University of Michigan. And my wife was well acquainted with Bo Schembechler, who was the famous Michigan coach. And after he retired, we'd go to games, and he'd invite us up to his then tiny little microscopic box. And we know his widow. We're very good friends with Kathy. Yeah, there's with the University of Michigan, no degrees of separation.
Is now a time you want to talk about Michigan football?
We were there, and there was a lot of optimism because it was the 50th anniversary of the game. It was Bo's first year. Against all odds, he beat Woody and he beat Ohio State, which walked in there undefeated at the time. So it was a huge anniversary. Dan Deerdorf and all those guys who were in that first group of Bo recruits who won that game had a huge gathering the night before, big anniversary party. We were all around all these folks that we've known for years and years and years and respect so much. So I will tell you, we were in the broadcast booth with Jimmy Brandstetter, who was another good friend of ours, who played for Bo. And there was a moment during the broadcast during a commercial break, where Jimmy just walks to the back wall, looks straight at a wall, utters some swear words, goes back and sits down and finishes the game.
Is Harbaugh going to stay?
He said he's going to.
Are they going to let him? Is the question, right?
Well, so the games he had.
Is the Harbaugh experiment over?
So.
And we're talking, for folks who don't know, Michigan, Ohio State, maybe one of the greatest rivalries, the greatest rivalry in college football, happened last week.
Greatest rivalry left.
Yeah. There's of course, the magnificent magnitude of Amherst versus Williams.
True that.
And Harvard, Yale, Army, Navy, a couple others,
excellent.
Army,
good
Navy
point.
coming up. But,
very good point.
But for ratings, I mean, Auburn, Alabama happened recently too, but it doesn't have that magnitude, it feels like, of Ohio State versus Michigan.
Kaboom.
And the question is now whether Harbaugh will be the future of Michigan or this experiment is over because they lost again.
Okay, but so they were looking at 3 games going in, right? Michigan State, Notre Dame, and for a lot of people at Michigan, Notre Dame actually is on the top of their rivalry list. So they beat Notre Dame. They handled Michigan State. That's 2 out of 3. I think, I don't know any of the inner workings of any of that stuff, but the thought is Harbaugh is a Michigan man, and that makes a difference. I don't know if you go out and, because think about this whole crazy business, right? Arkansas hires the guy from MSU. SMU 2 years ago, season and a half in. And he's like, his whole thing is he's a 4-year plan. Has amazing success at SMU. He's there a year and a half, they can him. people are writing checks for these contracts that go forever and ever and ever. I have no idea how this, on that level, I'm a D3 guy, right? I'm a D3 football player. I have no idea how any of that stuff works on that level, except there are people writing huge checks.
Well, maybe bringing it back around. Didn't Gerald Ford play at Michigan?
Heck yes.
So Gerald Ford played at Michigan.
Yeah.
And that's probably a Ford starting up right now in the background. But Gerald Ford is, I think, one of the only presidents to play Division I, but he played at Michigan.
Yeah.
And this game is happening.
Right.
And we just talked about Ford Motor Company.
Yeah.
We're talking about Michigan. I think the point I want to make here, Harry, is part of why I was excited about talking to you is I don't know if there's anybody that I know who knows America better than you. Like the intersection of sports, of politics, of culture, of regionalism, of media. All of that is one of the reasons why I was so excited to talk to you, man. And we're already deep into that. So for folks who maybe don't know how far your amazing career has spanned, the thing that I was thinking about getting ready for this interview is Harry's seen America inside and out for your whole life. Yeah. But it's been your profession for, 3 decades, 4 decades
plus
now?
Yeah.
Right?
So the cool thing for me, honestly, and I remember hitting this mark many, many years ago already, is I've reported, I've done stories in all 50 states, right? I've spent time, real time, not drive through, but real time in all 50 states, and that's like an important check in my, you have your boxes that you need to check.
That's a big deal.
That's a real thing for me, and quite honestly, I have a mantra that I use. Especially with the kids at work, and I say, every day outside of the building is a victory for the good guys. Because you know what? I cannot recommend highly enough the Jimmy Breslin documentary that was on HBO earlier this year. It'll be just type it in. You're sitting there on Thursday night. What are we going to watch? Okay, look it up. Jonathan Alter and these other guys made this amazing documentary about Jimmy Breslin. Give me 2 seconds. He was just in the paper. There was another great tabloid writer. Oh God, this is going to drive me nuts. And as soon as I stop thinking about it, I'll think about it anyway. But the part of the scene, one of the scenes in the documentary, is all these newsrooms where people have 3 screens in front of them, right? And Jimmy's whole thing was always, the story's outside. The story's on the street, right? The story's not, it's not from the wire service. You got to get your butt out into the world. And that's where, and a lot of times, and I help teach a writing class at NBC. Tell me to slow down or stop if you want me to, because I'll go on forever.
Go.
Okay.
That's the beauty.
And one of the things that I talk about is you see the scrum of media around a politician or a movie star or a newsmaker as they come out. I say, the story's not in the scrum. The story's almost never in the scrum. Maybe that person's going to say one thing that's worthwhile, but most of the rest of the time, it's not in the scrum. It's usually somewhere on the periphery of the scrum. You stand back from the scrum, it's a lot you're going to find a better story than the one that's in the middle of it.
I love that. I love that. I think that's right.
For those of you who are actually listening to the podcast and not looking at the video, this is my second time in this building. Last time I was here, we were just BSing about, well, I'm going to do this and I want to do that and I want to do that and I want to get your advice. And I'm like, this guy's so nuts, right?
Was that your reaction when I told you I want to start a media company and do a podcast?
Yeah. But you know what? Why not? Why not? Absolutely, why not? Because the world will never be flatter. And if what you have to present and how you do it actually has there's a word I like to use. It's an old Dutch word. It's echte. If it's authentic and it's real, it'll get traction. So that's it. There you go.
And that's been your career. You're authentic before authentic was a thing, right? You are. I mean, right now, authenticity is this thing you hear about.
Right.
But I go back to where I started, where you started. Like, I think, like many folks listening right now, I kind of grew up in an America with Harry Smith. You were like a GPS for America before there was GPS. You were a compass, right? Dude. And you kind of took us on these journeys across America and across ourselves, and really powerful conversations. So, when we first met, I don't know if you know this, I think it was actually on line to go into one of the political conventions. I don't think we had ever actually met. I was trying to figure it out. But it was either I think it was really hot. And it was at one of the political conventions,
and
maybe 2004 or 2008.
It's like, who are you? What are you doing?
And
blah,
I think
blah, blah,
somehow
blah, blah.
we started chatting. Like we were both stuck on like a ridiculously long line waiting hours to go
Security
inside.
line or something.
Yeah. And I think it was 2004 or 2008. And we were stuck outside.
Yeah.
I don't know if Triumph the Insult Comic Dog was there, but it was one of these chaotic scenes where everybody's just waiting to get inside this really relatively small venue, right? For a really and you and I just started talking shit, and we just struck up a conversation. And I've been
I said
thankful.
We got to put this guy on TV.
Wow, I don't know about that, but is
I
that
think
what
it
you
happened
said?
pretty soon.
I think it was happening around that time. But then we came back.
Well, you had something to say,
Yeah.
and there was so much about that war, and that go back to 9/11. Look at the response. Look at the initial response. Look at the secondary response. We'll call Iraq the secondary response. And there was just so much about all of that was so messed up. And we were looking for somebody who could, begin to articulate what that experience was like for guys who were coming back, men and women who were coming back. And we had this conversation standing in line. I said, "Who are you? What do you do? Blah, 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 blah." And I said, get your butt over here. We need to sit you down. Cause, anyway, I still don't think we know the enormity of what all of that was, just in terms of, it's so interesting because there's all this revisionist history. Oh, that was never a good idea. And why would we do that? And blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. When it was happening, there was it was close to unanimous. Like, oh, no, let's go do this thing. I remember we put Susan Sarandon on before the Iraq War started on, right? And our phones melted down. Because people were like, how can you put that blah, 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 blah on TV? That's, opposed to this is like America wanted its pound of flesh.
Right.
And that was what that was about, because the dots that were there were not connectable. So I'm
glad I think that's an insight into your life and your career, and part of why I wanted to sit down with you, because we could pull out these points that, you've been in everyone's living room for a generation, but they never really get to see you off camera. And I've been lucky enough to know you and have you as a mentor and a friend. You've given me a lot of guidance, especially in the last year, but really throughout my career. I consider you, one of the good guys, one of the honorable people, one of the people who is a throwback in all the good ways. But you've been so great in mentoring so many people along your career, but also helping us understand the importance of conversation and insight. And part of your magic, Harry, is in that approach. Like, you just got me to start spilling my guts online at a convention. In the same way you got Susan Sarandon to spill her guts, is the same way you got heads of state to spill their guts. But before we go too far down that line, I ask everybody who joins us what their adult beverage of choice is.
Right.
And your response was...
I said,
please,
bourbon, rye, and gin. Not necessarily in that order.
And Armagnac.
I love Armagnac.
Which I love. And I'm so glad you said that.
Stuff is so good. Right?
So, I had never had Armagnac until I think I was in Europe.
Yeah.
Where it's much more prevalent, right? Yeah. And for folks that don't know, it comes from, it's a smaller distribution, a different region of cognac, right? A brandy that comes from a region of France. But I had never had it until I went maybe Italy or France somewhere.
Yeah, France.
And I said, all right, I'm going to try this, right? And I loved it. And I came back, and every time I try to order it, nobody has it. They have cognac, they have Cavassier, they have whatever Puff Daddy's drinking in a video, but they don't have Armagnac. So I actually tried to get it here today for you, and they didn't have it.
I could have brought it from home.
They didn't have it. But we did. We went down the list, and I got some rye. And although it is kind of lunchtime, I'm going to pour you some rye. It's from the Fort Hamilton whiskey. Our friends here who were making rye in New York like they used to back in the old days.
Way back in the day.
Yes.
One of the myths or stories about rye,
please,
I just want to take a smell, is go back to colonial times, and everybody was, I don't know if it's a true story or not. I believe it's probably completely apocryphal, but there was the idea that people were drinking rum. right? So it's made from sugarcane, comes from the islands. They're drinking rum like crazy. Well, there were all kinds of times when there were wars going on and who knows what. And all these Dutch farmers up and down the Hudson River, they said, well, we can ferment this rye. We're growing ryegrass right out here in the pasture. And so that's one of the myths or stories about how rye came to be.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that Kentucky and other places embraced the whiskey industry during Prohibition, post-Prohibition, away New York and other places up north did not.
Yeah.
Right? So rye was, whiskey in the old days before bourbon and other stuff. So I'm dying to know, do you have a toast, Harry? When you drink, is there a toast to Harry
standard?
Smith? Yeah. Because you're such a man of arts and letters and culture and experience.
It's usually custom thought. There's no standard thing that I repeat and repeat and repeat.
So can we have a toast now?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. Well, may I offer it?
Please.
May I offer it?
Please.
Okay. So here's to freedom. Here's to respect. Here's to opportunity. And here's to the future.
Cheers. Thank you, sir. Beautiful. I'm so glad I asked that.
Yum.
What do you think of the whiskey?
Terrific.
It's good, right?
Yeah, really.
And
nice.
It's holiday time, so I feel like we're bundled up in a garage.
Right.
Winter is here, politically and environmentally.
The metaphor is rich.
Yes. But I asked this of all our guests, and I want to get to it with you. Harry Smith, what makes you angry?
So I've been thinking about when we had our chat here some months back, and you were talking about different names for what you were going to call this and everything. And I was like, maybe you need to touch the brakes on that a little bit. It felt aggressive to me, right? So I was recalling that there was a very progressive magazine back in my day called Ramparts. And I have this idea, and I tried to look it up on the way over today, but I remember it was Ramparts. Maybe it wasn't Ramparts, but there was a progressive magazine back in the day, and one of the taglines under the title of the magazine was, "It's better to be pissed off than to be pissed on," right? And so I'm thinking, sure, why not? And what I believe, what I'm going to take from your attitude about all of that, going back to your first initial response to what your experience was coming back from Afghanistan and coming back from wars, was you need to do something, right? Because it's one thing to sit on the sidelines and ballyhoo and complain and say, what about this and how come that and blah 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 blah, or you can say, we need to fix this. We need to fix this. Or we need to at least wrestle with it and let's deal with this. So I'm good. I'm good with what you're trying to accomplish here, right? Not that you're asking for my imprimatur or anything, but what makes me angry is injustice. Is injustice. And it's still prevalent. Greed makes me angry. Inequality makes me angry. They make me simultaneously angry and sad at the same time, right? This is a great graph in the paper yesterday. It might have been in the online version of the Times, and it talks about income inequality. And we did a focus group. We did a focus group with 11 Democratic voters in Eastern Pennsylvania about 2 months ago in preparation for a series of interviews, policy interviews we did with 10 of the candidates. And we spent 2 hours and 40 minutes with these folks. And as diverse a group as you could possibly imagine. It was an old sci-fi movie in the 60s where these people shrank down and got inside the body, human body, right? Impossible Voyage. I don't remember what the heck it was called.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm inside the body of the body of the Democratic Party, because it was so interesting and so diverse. But one of the things that really came out of this conversation was we can't afford to live in America anymore. This one guy says, okay, so I've started my own business, and my wife is working too. We have 2 kids under 5, and it costs me $23,000 a year to send my kids to daycare. $23,000 a year. Do you know what kind of gross/net income those 2 people have to have in order for that number to make any kind of fit into a budget? Add a mortgage, add student loan debt, add 2 car payments, add insurance, add blank, 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 blank. How does it pencil out is what they used to say. And it's tough out there. It's really tough out there.
That's so much the embodiment of what this show is intended to be. Like, you were representing angry Americans, Harry, a long time ago. I mean, people who felt like they weren't being heard, who felt like there was injustice, there was greed, there was corruption. And I think you were able to open up those voices for many Americans for decades. So and that's the spirit of this show. The idea that angry Americans are founders. Angry Americans are parents who are sick of seeing their kids get shot in schools. Angry Americans are people who can't make ends meet or are fighting opioids. There's a lot that if you're paying attention, you should be angry about. And the question is, what do we do with it? How do we turn that into positivity and not negativity? How do we turn that into something constructive? And that's where I've always loved your work, because you have done that. You've channeled that pain and anguish and energy, and there's always a positive energy to every piece that you do. I'm glad you mentioned the exploration of the candidates and the people, because I saw that piece and I thought it was really important. Like, who better to understand, not just like a quick soundbite, but really understanding America in all its diversity and all its complexity than Harry Smith. So when you did that, I thought it was very important. But building on that question, if you're that little person moving through the body of the Democratic Party, you're actually that person moving through the body of the great American experiment.
Right.
So when you think about the state of America, the body politic, how do you evaluate the health and wellness of our country right now as someone who is an expert?
Okay. What I heard Nancy Pelosi talking about how she tells everyone in her family what disease they have. She says, I'm a doctor without diploma. So that's me.
Yeah.
But so there are certain things that I know for sure. And yesterday I was in Portsmouth, Ohio. Portsmouth, Ohio once had 11 pain clinics, pill mills, discredited doctors doing cash prescriptions for people for opioids. 11 at one time. So this is one of the hardest hit places in the country. And we're there it was just yesterday. And I thought, this is so perfect for your show. We're doing this piece for Nightly News, probably do a longer version on a different broadcast at some point. But there are 2 veterans I met there. The one guy comes back, goes into the Navy, goes to college, goes back into the Army as an officer, and comes back to his hometown. And he says, I don't know what happened to my hometown. It was an opioid crisis. So he opens a gym, a CrossFit place, because he learned about CrossFit, and he found that was helping him cope post-duty abroad. And he opens this gym, and he decides at some point it's really starting to take off. And he's starting to sell some products, some eco-friendly products. Guy ends up on Shark Tank, for God's sake. Gets an investor, right? So things are going pretty good in his life. But he's home, and he says, I'm so mad at these people. These drug addicts are walking up and down the streets in my town. Don't they get it? What's wrong with these people? And he couldn't reconcile his post-duty abroad with these people who he felt like were wasting their lives. So for some unknown reason, 3 years ago, he decides to buy a building downtown and put his gym downtown, right? It's a wasteland. I promise you, it is a wasteland. Starts the gym up there. Some of the business guys are coming in, da-da-da-da-da. He said, maybe this CrossFit stuff could work for the people in recovery. So they go over and knock on the recovery guy door, and he says, yeah, bring that in there, see what we got. Amazing results. amazing results, right? You've got this guy, former military guy, in your face, take the next step, take the next step.
Right.
And it's such a metaphor for their own lives. Like, if I can get through this friggin' CrossFit class, maybe I can get a little more self-worth. If I can build up my self-worth, maybe I've got what I need to fight this disease. Unbeknownst to this guy, 3 blocks away, another veteran is opening up a restaurant, a brew pub in this wasteland. These guys get together, and now they're this unstoppable force in Portsmouth, Ohio, where all of a sudden there's life in a place where there was nothing but despair. And both of them said almost exactly the same thing. This is what we learned in the military. Sometimes the cavalry isn't going to come. Sometimes you just got to do what you got to do.
Yep. And that's the beachhead,
right,
for America's fight on opioids and so many other issues.
And think about all the different. Listen, there was no IAVA.
Right.
There was no IAVI. There was no. Right. There was bureaucracy, and there were people from Congress who were yabba 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 yabba, but there was no one saying, who are we and what are we about and what do we need most?
Right.
How can we need some other kind of services than whatever is coming down the pipe right now?
And if they don't exist, we're going to create them. And that's the American spirit, right? That's the innovation, the grit, the pioneerism, the picking yourself up by your bootstraps. And sometimes it's that angry outrage that drives it. So I think that's why this topic in particular is such an interwoven part of your career. And I'm grateful that you're here for it. So that beachhead is the spirit of this country, and maybe what I think is the untold part of the story that's happening in America. I don't want to simplify it, but you're a guy who also, in a time like this in politics, knows, I don't want to say the middle of America, geographically, but more the beating heart of America. Because I think that gets oversimplified. This idea that there's like a jump ball voter in rural Iowa, right, or in
Wisconsin,
rural,
Pennsylvania,
Ohio, right, and it's a working class white guy, or it's a lower middle class white woman, right, who's a jump ball voter,
right.
And I think that's a ridiculous oversimplification of the complexity of this country that is almost
without
like many different countries in and of itself, right? So, in particular, when you look at the candidates, what's your analysis? I mean, what do you see? What do you think is important? We're at a point now where Pete Buttigieg is leading in Iowa. He and Biden and Warren and Sanders to some extent are emerging. Now the candidates are really starting to drop out. Kamala's out. Now Kamala Harris is out.
Right.
People like Deval Patrick are jumping in. It's kind of chaotic.
Yeah.
But
Mike
Bloomberg is now jumping in. But what do you see, Harry?
Somebody asked me, because we've been out with these folks. We started in the springtime and did a whole series with, I think, 14 or 15 of them. Then came back and just finished another series where we did 9 or 10. Beto dropped out, so we didn't run him. He dropped out like 3 days after we did the interview. It was pretty funny. You see certain people who, like, for instance, the person early on, I had seen Elizabeth Warren in Northwest Iowa when there was still snow on the ground and the lakes were frozen. And I thought, I'm not reading this. I'm not whatever. And we used to interview with her with some frequency when I was still doing morning TV about the financial crisis. So I'm well acquainted with her, and she was always a very valuable guest. But I couldn't read whatever, I'm not sure this is going to translate. By the time we saw her then, when there were leaves on the trees in New Hampshire, she was growing. And as it turns out, she has this amazing narrative about, if there wasn't $50 tuition at my local school, I don't get my degree. There was a great moment with her on the stump where she's exchanging stories with this young, 14 or 15-year-old girl, and there's tears, and she was perceived as this almost automaton and brilliant person, but was she real? But she brings this real life narrative to the stump, and all of a sudden it skyrockets, and people sitting in the studios don't get it. But if the people are out, leave the building, thank you very much, Jimmy Breslin, then you can see it. You can actually see how she resonates with the crowd. We did an interview with her a month ago in North Carolina. They were lined up around the building, right? So there's you see when there's whatever that traction is, whatever that attraction is, you can see when it happens. Others, Cory Booker, you probably know, and we did several interviews with him. So passionate, so amazing. I have no idea why he can't, get mileage out of that. It's fascinating to me. I've been watching this stuff for a long time,
right?
And I don't know what the formula is. I do not know what the formula is that says this one is actually going to go up and this one is going to go down. I was surprised that Kamala didn't get more traction.
I wasn't.
Yeah.
I wasn't. I think there was a part of her that checked a lot of boxes, but I really think there was an element of her campaign that was in some ways a little bit too much like Trump, in that there was a lot of fighting, there was a lot of aggression, there was a lot of coming at people.
Yeah.
And that's her nature as a prosecutor. It's part of her brilliance. I think every one of these candidates has like a superpower.
Yeah.
Right. And if Kamala Harris ends up being an attorney general, she could be extraordinary. Maybe she'll be a Supreme Court justice. Maybe she'll be the vice presidential candidate.
Right.
But I think in the short term, she scored some points. But in the long term, it started to come apart. And when you take enough shots at your own side, eventually it comes back to get you. And that's kind of what happened on her campaign as the New York Times piece came out over the weekend talking about the internal strife, and then a couple of days later, she drops out. But I also think you touched on something important about Elizabeth Warren. One of her superpowers, in my view, Harry, is she's a learner. She's like a computer. She's learning so quickly, and she absorbs and digests information at a level that's really extraordinary. Yeah. So you can see her, if there's a candidate that's like improving or getting smarter, if she was a computer system, right? Like there's a level of awakening, right? Where it becomes alive. And that's kind of what I saw in her. She became this new level of alive. And a lot of it has to do with just how smart she is and how quickly she can learn. And I saw that working with her. When she was in the Senate and the Consumer Protection Board, she would really learn quickly, and they all kind of have their own superpower. But when I want to get into,
it ends up, right? What does it take? It ends up a matter of not just IQ but EQ, right? It takes a certain degree of emotional intelligence to be able to make it work too.
So to that point, right? You've got Biden, Buttigieg, and maybe Sanders, right? That are kind of still in the mix here. It seems like Biden and Buttigieg.
We don't know anything.
But Biden and Buttigieg.
Hang on. Good. This is like, if you go back and look at past election cycles and where certain people were in the election cycle, they were like, almost, who is that?
I get that, but I'm going to go back and ask you, because you are great. You're great at flipping it into analysis of the candidate or asking, twisting it to me. But I'm really curious if you're comfortable sharing what you think, because what do you see if Buttigieg and Biden were quarterbacks? How would you evaluate them? If they were cars, how would you evaluate them? There's something about the two of them that is continuing to resonate with the independent part of the country, the middle part of the country, the more moderate part of the country.
Sure.
And I think that's going to determine the election. A lot of folks who listen to the show that don't align with Republicans or Democrats are going to determine this election, maybe all elections, but I also think the country is more moderate than people have been seeing on Fox and MSNBC. That's also a part of what I want to explore in this show. So really, I want to push you on this, Harry. Biden and Buttigieg.
Yeah.
What do you think?
So it's a friend of mine who, Eric Salzman is the guy's name. He's a producer at NBC. Yeah. I worked with him doing politics at CBS as well. And we finished a first interview with Mayor Pete, months and months and months ago. And he just turns to me afterwards. He said, more people live in my neighborhood on the Upper West Side than live in South Bend, Indiana. And one of the things that I hear often as just I'm out and about is experience. I don't know how that, I'll be surprised if that doesn't come into play as time goes on.
Right.
On the other hand, he's out there in Iowa, and these Iowa voters they're serious consumers. They go and they kick tires. You know, they go to the church basement. They go to the local gym. They go to hear these guys, and to say, yeah, should we go back and see Pete again? What do you think? They're sitting over the kitchen table saying, what do you want to do tonight? Let's go see Joe Biden, because they're there. They're right in the neighborhood. All of these guys are very accessible in that regard. You can see how Biden is comfortable out there. He's got his no malarkey bus, and there's a degree of comfort that he's really trying to work on. But some of the TV images are hard to shake. Think of his performances in the debates. There were, I think even his people would agree, less than sterling. So, yeah. And does it even matter with the Super Tuesday that's so different from what we've known in the past? Because this stuff just is going to, once Iowa and New Hampshire happens, man, Nevada, boom, boom, South Carolina, it's going to go flying at us like crazy.
Yeah. And maybe that's what Deval Patrick and Mike Bloomberg want to be. If experience is important and Biden has maybe too much and Buttigieg doesn't have enough, who's the Goldilocks in the middle that might be just right? Because maybe it's Bloomberg, maybe it's Deval Patrick, maybe, again, I think people are overestimating the country's appetite for the far left of Warren and Sanders. And the party may make a choice in these early primary states to go in that direction, but it generally comes back to the middle. And I am not so arrogant that I will predict, but I think what's happening is the shaking out, right?
Yeah.
You've got Biden, you've got Buttigieg, Warren will be around, Sanders may be around, he probably will be. Others will be in the periphery.
He's stronger than ever. I mean, in terms
but he always hits
the
but he always hits the firewall in the South.
Right.
And that's the question of if he can endure that. And can they all come together at the end of this? Can it be Game of Thrones? Can they be Jon Snow against the White Walkers and Trump on the other side? That's the great question, right? So you love Game of Thrones?
Oh, totally.
I got Harry Smith on Game of Thrones. Please, what do you think? Such a good song, right?
Oh, my God. Oh.
What are your favorite shows of all time, Harry? Like, how do you rank? Because you are a man of experience now, just the right amount.
Yeah.
How good is Game of Thrones relative to shows of all time?
I had to be talked into it because our younger son was in college at the time, and he would come home in the summer and repair to a back room in the apartment and watch Thrones. And I said, I'm not a fantasy guy. I'm not a fantasy guy. And finally, after a while, he just said, you don't get it. I know you'll love it. You don't get it. I know you'll love it. You just have to do it. So I was getting on an airplane. I downloaded like season 1 or whatever it was. And I just went, what? Fun, really fun. Extraordinary piece of TV. So I had, I had a blast with that. I'm not a big binger. I see an episode, I'll be halfway through a second episode, and I'll say, how many of these? And they'll say 15. I said, I got it. I don't need to see this on the same episode, do the same thing over and over and over again. I just don't get attracted enough to the characters.
As that kind of content evolves, the media has evolved too. So I really want to get your thoughts on the state of the media. I mean, that's a broad thing to say, right? But you are talking to people that are now consuming media in so many different ways. There was a time where you were in, I don't know what percentage of living rooms, but it was double-digit percentages, right? Every morning or every evening, right? You were part of the family, and now it's splintered into so many different things.
Agreed.
But what do you, again? What does Harry Smith see in this evolution and Wild West that is the media landscape?
Yeah, we don't know bupkis because of streaming, and as Disney Plus, as NBC's got a streaming. Everybody's going to have a streaming. We're in a kind of streaming wars, and boy, I'm really going to sound like such an old grumpy guy. I carry 2 phones and an iPad. Right? I'm pretty for a Luddite. I'm pretty hooked up, but the phones in the end of the day are really harming us, and what comes across our screens. We have people in this country who spend 12 hours a day in front of a screen. one of the things that I've been really interested in, like in the last 6 months or so, is especially, I'm married to a glass ceiling breaker. My wife was in the Dallas Cowboys locker room. Tom Landry opens the door to the locker room for a preseason game in 1987 and says, "Men, she's coming in." 1987,
wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So she's busted down a lot of doors.
She's extraordinary. Her career is extraordinary.
So
and for
Andrea
folks that
Joyce,
don't know,
Andrea Joyce.
Right?
Anyway, yeah, she does a lot of Olympic stuff then, but back in the day, she did the NBA, she did NFL, she did all this stuff.
Yeah, she's extraordinary.
But what I see, what I read about is people, especially young people, spend so much time on these screens, and they're afraid to be themselves because the crowd is judging everyone's every single motion and moment. And so you have young women, for instance, teenage girls, staying home on the weekend instead of going out with their pals because they don't want to be shamed by whatever group is in the high school, right? So here are these women of a prior generation plus who have said, we're knocking down walls out here and we're growing opportunities, and we have a whole generation below them that are saying, we don't want to take the risk. It's kind of, there are days that I feel there's more harm, maybe even much more harm on screen than there is good. And in the end of the day, right, look at this world we're in, right? Well, don't you want to jump in not today maybe, but don't you want to kayak up the Hudson River someday?
Yes.
Yeah, you sure do.
I have kayaked on the Hudson River.
Exactly right.
It's extraordinary. It's
exactly
awesome.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Sail a boat, kayak a river, climb a mountain, right? Jump from rock to rock. All that stuff that's out there.
Yeah.
I was high in the Colorado Rockies this summer, and they had such an extraordinary and unusual, crazy snowfall last year. Even though the state has been ravaged by drought over the last decade, there was still columbines blooming at about 11,000 feet in August. Extraordinary. Never happens, right? And you're just climbing around in this stuff and saying, this is real. This is the real stuff. This is the stuff on the screens. It's why we allow ourselves to climb in there, and it becomes to the exclusion of everything else.
Right.
Sorry.
No, that's this. Every question
You go to. I'm a wormhole.
That's why I love having you with us. That's why I love podcasting, because we can go deep on subjects and we can see where they go. And every conversation I have with you, Harry, starts in one place but ends up being about kind of America and the world. That's your insight. That's your wisdom. And the guy who was on every screen in America is now warning us about the dangers of screens.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's profound, and it's important, and it cuts to the core of what it is to parent and what it is to be alive in this time. Last week, I was in the mountains with my kids. My baby is 9 months old, and he saw his first snowfall. And it was extraordinary to see that through his eyes, right? And my 4-year-old had his probably best sledding day, and I thought he went off a ledge, but it was only a hole, thank God. So, but it was that time when we were reconnecting with the earth and the land, and also recognizing that he was not only seeing his first snowfall, but we were high up in the mountains, and it was cold, and it was dark, and he really saw the stars for the first time.
Oh my God!
Like I could see that he saw them.
Yeah.
Like he was processing them. At some point he went and he doesn't speak in words. But the awe in his body and in his being, I saw.
Yeah.
And the reconnecting with the earth is so important, and it's also a through line for all that you do, Harry. It's a through line in a lot of your work is that you're out there, you're out of the building, you're in the streets and in the mountains and in the hills, and there's a connection to the greatness of this country that I think is a really important part of your work that I am grateful for.
Well, thanks, dude. I'll tell you what else though is you can't read enough, you can't experience enough, you can't listen enough. I mean, honestly, some of the people we met just in the last year, I met Joy Harjo, who is the new poet laureate of the United States. First Native American to become poet laureate. This woman writes tears to your eyes, tears to your eyes. One of her latest books is about the mass forced migration of Native Americans out of the South in the 1800s, a couple of decades before the war between the states. Insane. Just hear these people. there are things that I understand better, I would say, at 68 years old than I ever understood at 20 or 25 or 35 or whatever. And I'm reading these words about this was home, right? There was a great piece in the Times just the other week about the real Thanksgiving. And what, we talk about our American exceptionalism and all this other stuff. Man, do we have blood on our hands, right? What we did to get what we got. And now, so Joy Harjo's one. The woman who is one of the first 2 Native American women elected to Congress from Deb Haaland.
I saw your piece on that too. That was fantastic.
From New Hampshire, right? Yeah. And I said, so talk to me a little bit about your lineage. Well, my mother's family, my father's family, they're Norwegians, and they've been in the country about 100 years or so. And she said, and my mother's family, well, they're Pueblo Indians, and well, they've been here for 1,200 years. Right?
Right.
That whole kind of, if your eyes and your ears and your heart isn't open, you can't know, you'll never learn about stuff like that.
I know would you ever run for political office, Harry?
No, I don't know how.
Would you? I would love if there was an enlightened president who could find the right spot for you as like ambassador for America. Like because you're such a great, like the head of tourism or the head of like if there was a Nobel, a poet laureate, a national poet laureate for like appreciation of America. Like you've talked to more people and been to more places than, frankly, I think any human that I know, any person that I know, and it's extraordinary to see the world through your eyes. But I have to ask you, because we are in the Classic Car Club, and it's a question I ask of all people.
Yeah.
You grew up in the Midwest,
right?
Yeah, in Indiana.
Well, I was born in St. Margaret's Hospital in Hammond, Indiana. We live right across the state line in Lansing, Illinois. It's about 6+ miles straight south of the city limits of Chicago.
And when you were growing up, Harry Smith, what was your first car?
Well, my first car was actually my mother's car. My mother had a 1964 Buick Wildcat Coupe. Right? Nice.
Wow.
Really nice. And my senior year, I was allowed to take it to college. And that was the car that I then rode away with after I graduated from college. And but the first car.
What color was that car? The Wildcat?
It was a kind of a rose and cream.
Rose and cream?
Yeah. White cream top.
Ah.
You know, that cream, not a white, it was kind of a cream. And a rose color. Right, 2-door coupe, nice,
very cool.
Yeah, no post, right?
Very cool, very cool. And rose is not a color you see on cars very often anymore.
That's the color I would describe it as. Right?
Yeah, I love that.
But then the first car I bought then after that was a Super Beetle, VW Super Beetle, and which was a Volkswagen made the same car for many, many years, and then they made a Super Beetle, which is a little heavier, a little bit bigger engine. You bought a Beetle, then you bought the book. There was this book that everybody kept under the front seat of their Volkswagen, right? And it taught you how, because you could fix. There was a lot about a Volkswagen you could fix, right? So you could change your own plugs and change the oil and do different kinds of stuff like that. So you had that. Listen, I wasn't the classic guy that was driving around in the Volkswagen where you could see the ground underneath the floorboards because they were rusted out.
You're a tall guy. You fit in a Volkswagen.
I did. But there are a lot of cars. Like there's oh my God, I wanted to buy a Lancia once.
Wow.
Way back in the day, I didn't fit. There were so many cars I don't fit.
How tall are you?
Well, I used to be a little over 6'2".
6'2"?
But I'm not anymore.
And what color was the Volkswagen?
Orange.
Orange?
Yeah.
I'm so glad I asked. I would not have expected you to say orange.
So Arab oil embargo is going on, and they lower the speed limits, right? They lower the speed limits to 55 miles an hour. So I'm driving on the interstate way, way out in eastern Colorado, and I'm doing 75 easy in the Super Beetle. It's a Super Beetle. It's got a little bit bigger motor, right? And I get pulled over. So I have to go to a traffic court in Greeley, Colorado, which was like a speck of a town. And so I go in front of the judge, and I said, I don't think the law applies equally to everyone, this 55 mile an hour speed limit, because this is aimed at gas guzzlers. I have a car that averages more than 28 miles to the gallon. So I don't know why I have to abide by the same rules that everyone else does, because I'm not violating the spirit of that law in the first place because I get such good gas mileage. And the judge looks at the assistant, whoever is, doing the thing. It's just say, tell the guy to shut up and plead no contest. Get him out of here.
Have you gotten a lot of speeding tickets across America?
I have not. I've been really circumspect. I've really toned it down over the years.
So is that a way of saying yes, you had gotten a lot of speeding tickets earlier in your life?
I really got nailed once again in Eastern Colorado.
You said you've been to 50 states. How many states have you gotten speeding tickets?
No. I'm not David. I wasn't David Letterman. I've been really, really good. I've been very good driving record and good insurance record. But we're in a 2-lane blacktop in Eastern Colorado about 4 years ago. There's nothing out there. I mean, there's absolutely nothing out there. It's part of the depopulation of America, which is its own other subject, which I could go on and on and on and on about rural America. But I was probably in the 90s. It's an unmarked car coming from the other direction, and as soon as I went by, I said, ugh, right. Rental car.
Oh, yeah.
Eastern Colorado.
Out-of-state plates.
All the above.
Yep.
Do you have registration for this? It's a rental car. I don't know what gives here. But I'm nice. I'm like, whatever.
Did he know it was you? Were you recognized?
I don't think so.
No, the younger generation of cops don't know you from their living room like the older generation do.
No, that stopped a while ago.
So Harry, you're a guy that has, I think, tremendous joy and an appreciation for life. I ask this of all of our guests. Harry Smith, what makes you happy?
Honestly, it's really small things. It's really, really small things. Tiny little microscopic acts of kindness are here's what, just as an example. So my typical MO in the morning is I still get a physical New York Times, a physical paper, and I have a big old leather chair, which I have my books stacked up on, and various periodicals and all that stuff, and crossword puzzles. And,
yes.
Yeah, it's just this cranky old, stinky old man, right? And I'll go to...
a learned, patient, wise old man.
And I'll go to that chair in the morning, and if I haven't made the coffee, and if my wife comes around the corner with a cup of coffee, I'm just like, that makes me so happy, because it's just a tiny, teeny, teeny, tiny thing. But somebody's like, I'm looking out for you, right?
Yeah.
I got your coffee. It doesn't take much for me, honestly.
Yeah.
It's little tiny things like that I just absolutely just knock me out.
Harry, when you look at this country and the state it's in right now,
yeah,
what do you think?
It's not as bad as so. I was in Oklahoma a couple of years ago, and back to opioids again. And it's well-known attorney in the state whose son played for OU. Kid has this amazing senior year. He had a couple of injuries over time, and the parents were up to speed. They knew what was what, and they knew that he was prescribed opioids, through some of these injuries. But they would see the bottle, and he never got to the bottom. It was like they were up to speed. They felt like they were up to speed, and he and his father make their annual trip to St. Louis to see the Cardinals play for a couple of games. They're staying in the same room. They go back to Oklahoma. 2 days later, the kid ODs. And the parents have made it part of their mission to tell as many people who will listen.
Did he die?
Yeah.
Yeah.
About their son. And the mom says, this is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. But I'll talk to anybody. And it's excruciating for me. But I'll talk to anybody, because if I can help one person understand what might be happening in their own home, that means everything to me. And I think, quite honestly, I mean, I'll just say it. That's what we're actually about. We can get so caught up in, oh, I'm watching this channel. Oh, I'm watching this channel. This is my truth. That's your truth. That's day to day to day. That isn't what people live with every day. Day to day are the guys in Portsmouth, Ohio, who are building, saying, screw it, we're going to rebuild this town, right? Day to day, there are the folks in Oklahoma who said, we lost something more important to us than any amount of money, but we'll tell our story to anybody who will listen to it. That's who we actually are. The other stuff, it's real. It's real on a level, but it's not the fabric of our daily lives. It's not really what the currency of our lives on this planet are about. It's about, people chipping in to do X or chipping in to do Y, or going to the PTA meeting or shoveling the neighbor's sidewalk. That's who we actually are.
Any related to that, Harry, because you have such an astute understanding. I think that gives people hope and maybe some comfort, but most of all, perspective. And that's been a through line in your career and in all your work. Just now that you're at this point in your life where you are mentoring so many people, and every time you talk, you're teaching.
Yeah.
Thoughts on, you and your wife have, it seems, an extraordinary marriage. You've both been so accomplished. You have kids. You're such a dedicated family person. Any perspective on all of that, especially as we go into the holidays? Any lessons learned, or if there's a young man or woman who's earlier in their career or earlier in starting a family, any counsel or perspective that you can share?
All of that remains a work in progress as far as I'm concerned, right? Old friend of mine who was a clinical psychologist, once told me, all relationships are at risk always, right? Don't take anything for granted. Wow. In terms of, one of the things that I tell young people who I come in contact with, who either come in looking for advice, or people I work with at NBC, is you can't do enough homework. There's no such thing as enough homework. If you are an actually curious person that is like hungry for information, not curious, like I'm a bit curious. That's a huge advantage, because the more you learn, the better off you are. And especially for these in our world, because so often we get a tiny amount of time to tell a story. But if you understand as much about it as humanly possible, it's going to help you tell that story better. That's one of the things I say. The other thing is, a lot of it has got to be about perseverance. Perseverance is, I'm lucky to still be around, but I didn't get my first steps without, I kept knocking on doors. I just kept knocking on doors. I was a nuisance. I was a complete nuisance. Now I'm a legend, right?
Yes.
But I was a nuisance.
You were a grinder. But to that point,
it's a total grinder.
And you may be the most experienced guest we've had on this show. I don't, in technical terms, you may be the oldest. Yeah, which I think is a badge of honor and wisdom. We respect our elders, and I hate to classify you an elder, except in the most extraordinary way.
I'm an elder, dude.
You're an elder. Yeah. You're an oracle for this country, but you're also the only guest who ever showed up with a notepad. Yeah. So you have an old school spiral notepad, like a reporter would have. Yeah. Can I ask you what's on it?
No. So
you brought notes.
I wrote a couple of names down, because the two guys in Portsmouth are Tim Wolfe and Dale King. But I've neglected to name their names. But I was thinking about other stories that I have no idea where the story, our conversation was going to go. And just 2 weeks ago, we were in Virginia, and we're starting a new series where it's kind of a little bit of a pilot. We don't know if it's going to work for sure or not. But I work with this wonderful producer named Caroline Gottlieb, and she had this idea of going to the Smithsonian, finding certain items, and then matching the item to an actual human being. And so this particular story is a set of pajamas that one of the POWs brought back with him from Vietnam, because that's what they called them, pajamas.
Pajamas. Yeah.
And so we found out whose pajamas they were. And we spent an afternoon with Commander Al Carpenter, who spent 6.5 years in prisons in Vietnam, got shot down out of his fighter plane. Right? Holy crap.
Wow.
Holy crap. I mean, like in your life, okay, I read. Put the windshield wipers on here for a second, because I get very emotional about this stuff.
Yeah.
I've had the most extraordinary life in terms of where I've been able to go and what I've been able to see. And there I am, like 2 Tuesdays ago in this guy's house for the better part of a day. And he's talking about what happened to him. And he talked about how through the whole time that he was in prison, he would say, you would tell yourself, you'd make up these like ideas for yourself. Well, I'm going to get out by Christmas. I'm going to get out by Valentine's Day. I'm going to get out by Memorial Day. I'm going to get out, and over time you realize this is really never going to happen. And he said one of the hardest things for him, because as the war is winding down, he said all of a sudden our food is better. We're with a bunch of other more other prisoners, and some of the guys who were hurt, they weren't the first ones in. They started to let those guys in. The reality of getting out started to become. He refused to believe it was real. And he said, it wasn't until I was on the tarmac and there was these 2 Air Force cargo planes, motors going, right? Props buzzing around. He says he was completely overwhelmed. And he's telling the story. Tears are flowing down his face. And I'm just sitting there in silence, watching him. And he said, but the hardest part was then coming back was, he said it was hard to let life in, because he'd refused. You had to, in order to stay strong, you knew things weren't, truth was not available to you. The only truth was your captivity. And he said over time it melts away. But anyway, that I got to spend, several hours with this guy who's got a better job than I do.
And who does a better job of it than you?
Nah.
No, you've been an incredible. Carrying stories requires such art and skill and heart and dedication and perseverance, but it's also heavy. And you carry the stories of so many people, and you've shared them in such a powerful way that we are exceptionally grateful. All of us who are listening and who've been witness to your work are grateful. And since it is the holiday spirit, we do have some gifts. We have the giving of the gifts, which is a part of this show.
How cool is that?
Yes. And so in this bag, you have 3 gifts. And one of them is also a question. But first, you have some American-made Angry Americans merch, which is made by veterans.
Oh, man.
Outside of Chicago.
Right.
In Illinois.
All right.
So a little bit of a test of a toast to your home. It says angry on it. Folks who are listening, you can find those at angryamericans.us, made by Oscar Mike.
I love it.
We've got blue and I think the other color is like
cool
steel.
Stuff.
And then this, before we get to the last piece, this is the last question I will ask of you.
Peeps.
Peeps. There are 3 colors: blue, yellow, pink. I've asked every guest, what color do you choose and why?
I'll never eat one.
But if you had to choose, which color would you choose, Harry?
Yellow.
Why?
Because it's the color of the chick.
There you go.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And
finally,
a very own lovely party
for
gift
you, American made.
10 years
course.
old.
This is American made whiskey. It's Henry McKenna.
Yeah.
It's each one is individually numbered, and each one is an original, an American original, as is Harry Smith. So we look for an inspiration each bottle that we give to each gift.
Right. It's 100 proof, by the way.
And it's also 100 proof, as my colleague Mercy Rich put it. You're a man at this point in your life, there's no messing around. You can get straight to the point, and you can handle the powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Because every guest we've had is an important, iconic, and or inspiring American, and that's truly what you are, my friend, and I'm very, very grateful for you. And I want you to know how much I appreciate your support for me and this venture and this next phase of my life, but just how much you do for this country. You really contribute a tremendous amount to the health and development and wisdom of this country, and I am extremely grateful for you.
I appreciate that very, very much, but I come here because I have respect for you. That's the whole. This is an actual quid pro quo. It's a 2-way street, right? No, we've had, there's some simpatico here.
Yes.
And we've shared some very strong feelings about things over the years. So when you said, would I come? I said, I'm there.
Well,
because you answered the bell for us so many times over the years.
Well, America's a team game. And
write that one down.
If you were the coach of Michigan,
yeah,
I would feel a lot more optimistic about Michigan's prospects.
So tough. That is so
and
tough.
if you were president, I would feel a lot of it. But you're a statesman for all of us, and you're a gentleman.
I have the job I'm supposed to have.
There's real insight in that. Did you know that all along?
You know, there was an anniversary of when I first went on morning television. It was like 32 years ago or something. It was sometime in November. And somebody sent me a note. And I remember when I first took the job, I'd been a correspondent for a couple of years for CBS. And I didn't have an agent. They said, we want to put you on morning television. I said, I don't want to be on morning television. I said, you're going to cancel this show after 6 months. Just let me go back and do my job. I just guarantee me I can go back and be a reporter. Because in the end of the day, that's all I ever really, really wanted to do. So right now, I was honestly, this morning, I was talking to some people about some stories we were working on. I felt like I'm living my best life. Who gets to say that? Thoreau, I think, said most men live lives of quiet desperation. Not me, Bob. Not me. Not me.
Not you, my friend.
Yeah.
Thank you again for joining us. We're excited to watch the world through your eyes.
My pleasure.
Especially in the next couple of years. Ladies and gentlemen, the great and powerful Harry Smith, a truly great American, live from the Classic Car Club in New York. Follow Harry every day, every way. And if you're lucky enough to meet him online some point, consider yourself blessed. He's a great American. Thank you, Harry.
Vroom, vroom.
Vroom, vroom.